Good morning, everyone. I could probably talk to you for an hour about Bill C-76 and not do it justice. I'm going to say that a lot in this video. This video is going to be longer than I anticipate it being, and I anticipate it being a long video. So let's buckle in. Who is this? This is Stephanie Kusie. Sorry if I've said your name wrong, madam. And she is the Member of Parliament for Calgary. And I'm not going to say the rest of it. And she is the shadow minister for the democratic institutions. And she held a press conference on October 30th, just before Halloween, that I think is important. It got lost in the shuffle, and it's going to prep us for the rest of this mess that I have to talk to you about. And honestly, I could talk to you about this for an hour and not do it justice. This bill, Bill C-76, is terrifying. Terrifying. And I'm just going to scratch the surface and show you what's upsetting me this morning. And, well, I don't know. I hope to generate some phone calls to MPs today, maybe. So, well, here she is. I'm going to let her do all of the English parts. So we're going to watch all of the English parts. She initially touches on Bill C-76, but the first minute is spent talking about some other stuff. I think it's important because it's other ways that the sitting Liberal majority government is using their majority to influence the next election. And that's not my words, that's her words. But she'll get there. And so I think the whole context is important. I don't want to cut her up to just hear about Bill C-76. I want the whole context here because it's important, really important. Okay, here we go.
Good morning, and thank you everyone for being here. This is a very sad day for democracy in Canada, and not just for one reason, but for so many reasons. In addition to Bill C-76 being pushed through the House, we are also seeing, of course, the by-election situation, a situation where only 1 out of 4 by-elections has been called, leaving more than 300,000 Canadians without a voice. In addition to that, this morning we saw the appointment of the debate commissioner, in addition to the process for the debates, once again being forced into the democratic process here in Canada, a process which was not democratic, a process in which all parties did not have the opportunity to choose the debate commissioner and to be a part of the process, not even a short list. But of course, we're also here today to talk about Bill C-76, a bill which fails so desperately Canadians and their political process through so many regards. It does not ensure that third parties will be safe in terms of foreign interference and foreign influence. It does not protect the legitimacy of our electoral system. So as we see, by unilaterally imposing new rules around televised leaders' debates, Justin Trudeau is once again attempting to rig the 2019 election, sadly, in his favor. There is absolutely no reason or precedent for the executive branch of government to impose elections regulations without debate in the House of Commons. It is an affront to democracy. The Trudeau Liberals are currently ramming through Bill C-76, a new elections law that allows Liberal-friendly foreign special interests. And I will add, we tried desperately as the official opposition through for close to 200 amendments to adjust these rules so that they would in fact protect our electoral process. Now they are creating a new and unaccountable office to oversee elections and interpret vague and poorly worded regulation, as I'm sure you know from reading the information this morning. Canada's Conservatives firmly opposed the creation of this commission when it was brought before the Procedure and House Affairs Committee. Elections must be decided by Canadians in a transparent electoral system that is fair for all parties. This is not what is happening under the Trudeau Liberals. Andrew Scheer's Conservatives, along with my colleagues, will continue to fight Justin Trudeau's desperate attempts to rig the next election to the Liberals' advantage. Thank you very much.
Okay, now we get the French version and then questions. So the election commissioner that she was talking about, sorry about that, the election commissioner she was talking about has a 10-year term. 10 years. So Trudeau gets to decide unilaterally who that person is, and he's decided, and that's another story for a different video. But I wanted to mention that she talks about it here and kind of touches on it, and then she loses her thread and goes back to her notes, so she forgets to mention this part, I believe. But it's a 10-year term, so not only did the the opposition not get a say in who, not even a short list, the opposition and other parties didn't get a say in, in any of this, right? Because the Liberals are using their majority to ram through these election changes, and they're very concerning. Okay, so we're going to move forward to 740, and this is a first question. And the reporter goes after her about accusing Trudeau of rigging the next election, because, I mean, that is a pretty serious accusation. So here we go.
You're going pretty far to suggest that Justin Trudeau is planning to rig the next election. That's a pretty serious allegation. So how is naming a former Governor General to head up an independent debate commission evidence that Justin Trudeau has a plan to rig the next election?
Well, first of all, I would say that I think that we have seen this in every regard, and in fact, the decision to only hold one by-election, in addition to essentially completely control the leadership debate process, just supports this fact. And we saw this extensively with Bill C-76 in terms of, I would say, not only determining the spending limits during the pre-writ period, but in addition to not really making watertight the foreign interference and foreign influence pieces. If there was a sincere effort to protect the democracy, I think we would have seen, they would have accepted our amendments, and we would have seen a better bill come out of this as a result of it.
Ms. Kusie, the Calgary Olympic bid seems to be falling apart. You're a Calgary and Katie, whose fault is it?
So they start talking about Calgary there, and that's not kind of off topic. And the rest of the conference is interesting. We're not gonna watch the rest of it because I've got a lot more to get to. But I thought it was good that the Conservatives, number one, were clear about how much they fought in the House. And I've read a lot of different reports talking about how much they fought about this, both from senators, House members, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of opposition to this bill. Regardless, it's moving through the House, and it's already past its third reading at this point in time, or it's in the third reading, I believe. So here's Senator Linda Frum, and she's tweeting, quote, Liberals' rushed election bill C-76 will change the criteria for who is eligible to vote. As many as 2 million non-resident Canadians will have a say in the 2019 result, even if they never intend to live in Canada ever again. And I was like, okay, so we're going to look through the bill. Here's Bill C-76, and we're going to look at resident, the word resident. And there's a couple that I want to highlight for us. And the link is in the description. And feel free to go through, and I've got my keywords in the description as well, so you can have a look at what I'm looking at if you like. It's all here. So resident, number 6, talks about the electors. Sorry, we need to go back to number 1. There it is. This is the summary of the bill, summary of the changes. And letter H says, quote, removes 2 limitations on voting by non-resident electors. Electors are citizens, you and I. The requirement that they have been residing out of Canada for less than 5 consecutive years, and the requirement that they intend to return to Canada to resume residence in the future. So it removes those 2 limitations. So if you have left Canada and have been out of Canada for 5 years and you never intend to return to Canada, please register to vote as soon as possible. And by the way, don't vote Liberal. Don't vote Liberal. So, but that's the rule. That's what they want to change. So I started looking through the document for the word resident, and found it, and I started highlighting what was important. So number 6 is talking about elector resident outside of Canada. So inclusion in the register of elector resident outside of Canada. Number 221, an elector may vote under this division if A, his or her application for registration and special ballot is received by the Special Voting Rules Administration in the nation capital region no later than 6 p.m. on the 6th day before polling day, and his or her name is entered on the register. So if you register to vote, you can vote. Just simple as that. Nice and clean. And number 9 is going to lead into our next story. So I wanted to point out they do have specific rules in this bill that say you cannot cheat in this election. Okay, I'm going to read them out right now. So this is number 8. Quote, not ordinary resident in electoral district. No person shall, this is 281-4, A, no person shall vote or attempt to vote in an election in a particular electoral district knowing that his or her place of ordinary residence is not in that electoral district. Or B, induce or attempt to induce another person to vote in an electoral election in a particular electoral district knowing that the other person's place of ordinary residence is not in that electoral district. Voting more than once, no person shall vote who has voted in a general election shall vote again or attempt to vote again in the general election. Voting more than once by-election, and same thing in a by-election. Okay, so they do specifically talk about that, right? But it's kind of wagging your finger because they changed the rules for proving it, et cetera, but that's beside the point. Back to the resident stuff. Okay, so undue influence by foreigners. No person or entity referred to in any paragraph A to E shall, and A to E is just right here, shall during an election period unduly influence an elector to vote or refrain from voting, or to vote or refrain from voting for a particular candidate or registered party in the election. So an individual who is not a Canadian citizen or permanent resident as defined in subsection 2(1) of the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act and who does not reside in Canada. So I was like, okay, so what constitutes a permanent resident? So I have that here. So hold on a second. Okay, we'll look at the permanent resident in just a minute. So basically this is saying no person can influence another person to vote or to not vote if you're a Canadian citizen or if you're a permanent resident, and we're going to look at the permanent resident stuff in a minute. And here's the meaning of unduly influencing. Okay, so for the purposes of subsection 1, what we're looking at up here, a person or entity unduly influences an elector to vote or refrain from voting, or to vote or refrain from voting for a particular candidate or registered party at an election if they knowingly incur an expense to directly promote or oppose a candidate in that election, a registered party that has endorsed a candidate in that election, or the leader of such registered party, or B, one of the things done by them to influence the elector is an offence under the Act of Parliament, or a regulation made under any such act, or under an act of the legislature or province, or a regulation made under any such act. So they're saying don't do it. All that is to say, don't do it, right? You're not allowed to influence the election. But they also allow vouching. So you're allowed to vouch for the identity or residence of somebody. So maybe if you're living out of Canada, if you're an expat somewhere, maybe, is it election tampering if you get somebody else who lives with you to vote in the Canadian election? Would that be election tampering, or would that be vouching? I don't know. Here's number F letter F in the summary. Quote, replaces in the context of voter identification the option of assertion for residence with an option of vouching for identity and residence. So we look at that because I thought, man, really? You can just vouch for somebody? So vouching for electors in long-term care institutions. So there are a couple of instances where, maybe that's going to happen. That needs to happen. So, quote, 301 says, if an elector who resides in an institution for seniors or persons with a disability wishes to prove his or her identity and residence under subsection 3, the other elector referred to in that subsection who accompanied him or her may be an employee of the institution who resides despite that subsection in any polling division in the elector's electoral district or an adjunct electoral district. So they're saying that if the person needs help, like in a wheelchair or something like that, and they forgot their identification, I suppose the employees of the wherever they live can vouch for them. Interesting. I didn't know that. Okay, so requirement for before making a solemn declaration vouching for an elector. If a person decides to vouch for an elector by making the solemn declaration referred to in subsection 549-1(2) in writing, an election officer shall, before the person makes the solemn declaration, advise him or her in writing of the penalty that may be imposed under this act on a person who contravenes any subsections 282(1) to 3 or 549(3). And I'll show you 549(3). Sometimes these things take a minute to load, but it didn't at all. Okay, so here's 549. Oh, sorry about that. It's actually not set up. And now it is. Okay, so solemn declaration voting. This is 549 1 to 3. Okay, so for the purposes of subsections 143 and 3.2 and sections 144 and 147, so these are all of the paragraphs that reference 549 1. The solemn declaration by which an elector proves his or her identity and residence, proves his or her residence only, proves that he or she is qualified as an elector, or proves that he or she has not previously voted in an election, shall be in the prescribed form, which shall include the statement that A, the elector resides at the address at which he or she claims to reside, B, the elector is 18 years of age or older and will be 18 years of age or older on polling day, the elector is a Canadian citizen, and the elector has not previously voted in the election and is not an elector to whom Section 235 applies. And that would, I'm not going to show you 235 right now because I haven't looked at it, and really these things reference so many things. I'm sure it's to make it hard to read. I'm sure of it. So there is a reason for this to be invalidated, and I'm sure it's just like the example I gave you for the old folks home. I'm sure that, there's some legitimate reason somewhere that somebody's going to be exempt from this, right? But for the purposes overall, this is what the solemn declaration has to include. Okay, so part 2 is for the purposes of the paragraph 143 3b and subparagraphs blah, the solemn declaration by which an elector vouches for another elector shall be in the prescribed form. So they're just saying this is what we need to see. A, the elector resides in polling division assigned to the polling station. B, to the best of the elector's knowledge, the other elector has not previously voted at the election. C, the elector knows the other elector. D, the elector is a Canadian citizen when the other elector votes. And E, except in the case referred to in all of these other subsections, the elector has not previously vouched for any other any other elector at the election. And F, the elector has not vouched for by another elector at the election. And these are actually exactly those instances that I talked about, the old age home, and there's a couple other ones where they have people vouching for people. So that's crazy. That's an insane misuse of just ill-advised laws. So there's other vouching outlines here in Bill C-76. So this is 201 talks about vouching for electors in long-term care institutions, et cetera, et cetera. So, and there are rules around it too. So 282-1 or part 1 is no person shall vouch for more than one person in an election. But that's hard to prove, especially when you've just got pieces of paper saying, yeah, that guy's totally legit. He lives where he says he lives, et cetera, et cetera. That makes ensuring our elections are reflective of what Canadian citizens want really difficult. And watching what's happening down in the United States right now, and if you're not watching what's happening down in the United States right now, watch, because their electoral system is up in flames, literally. And this vouching stuff and having non-resident citizens able to vote is going to swing this election hugely, massively. The low estimates are an extra 2 million votes. And if you don't think an extra 2 million votes in a population of about 36, 37 million is going to change things, oh yeah, it's going to change things massively. Where do you think those voters are going to live? I would have to say, maybe rural Ontario, rural Quebec, right? Going to find a whole bunch of ballot boxes, just like Florida. Unbelievable. So I went down the other rabbit hole of permanent residence. So what does a permanent resident mean? And I just wanted to know this for my own sanity, because I was like, which refugees or irregular border crossers or illegal border jumpers or asylum seekers, all of these conflated words mean the same thing. How many of these people are getting permanent resident status? And so here it is. Permanent resident means a person who has acquired permanent resident status and has not subsequently lost that status under Section 46. So that was not helpful at all. So I had to keep looking. Just landed, and again, link is in the description, talks about permanent residency, which used to be landed immigrant status, and now it's called the permanent resident card. So, quote, every year 200,000 people are allowed to enter Canada as permanent residents. They complete an applications process that provides them with an opportunity for a new life in Canada. Once approved to enter Canada as a permanent resident, an individual receives a permanent resident card, formerly landed immigrant form, and they enjoy almost all the same rights as citizens of Canada, with the exception of voting privileges and unlimited stays when traveling outside of Canada. So my mom is a landed immigrant, and she doesn't vote because she can't vote because her card doesn't allow that. But we've had reports already that asylum seekers, so these are illegal border crossers, received a voter registration card. This is from The Sun. So my mom has been in Canada since she was 18 years old, and she's not 18 anymore. 27 forever, Mom. But my mom is still alive. I didn't mean to make any reference to being dead. She's still alive and just wouldn't want me to share her age. And if she chooses not to vote, that's fine. But I'm sure she could vote because she's got all the documentation to walk in there, and she's got letters, and I'm sure she gets voter registration cards. I've seen them with her name on them, and she doesn't vote. But we talk about this kind of stuff. So, like I said, our elections are going to be eyebrow raising, I think, and not in a good way. So this is another article talking about the Liberals' changes to voter ID, incredibly concerning, and it's from the Toronto Sun, but it is what it is. And this one I wanted to show you because the Bill C-76 and letter E in the summary says it removes the prohibition on the chief electoral officer authorizing the notice of confirmation of registration, commonly known as a voter information card, as identification. So these cards that they're getting, this is not a voter identification card, it's a voter registration card, but getting one of these leads to getting one of those. So, and I want to be clear, right? They're not getting these, but it's a slippery slope, right? How long until they are? Here's more opposition to Bill C-76, and this kind of goes down a different rabbit hole. And as I said, I could talk for an hour about this. I've talked for half an hour now about this, and I'm still not even close. We've got a couple more things to look at, but I am close. But the point is, there is a lot wrong with this bill, and the Liberals are deaf to any criticism. It's like asking Mr. Morneau a question. Like, hey, where did you put the ketchup? 25 minutes later, you'd be like, right, so the ketchup is... Okay, back to the article. Bill C-76, like the recently enacted Bill C-50 that comes into effect on December 18th, is a charade that does nothing to stop the unethical influence of big money in Canadian politics. The bill doesn't change the annual individual donation limit of $1,575 to each party and another $1,575 to the riding associations of each party, both increased each year by 25, nor does it decrease the $5,000 amount an election candidate can give to their own campaign or the $25,000 a party leadership candidate can give to their campaign. These high donation limits are much more than the average adult Canadian can afford. They favor wealthy donors and candidates and facilitates funneling of donations from businesses and unions through their executives, which has occurred in every jurisdiction in Canada with high donation limits. And there's a link. Democracy Watch relentlessly filed complaints with the Federal Ethics Commission and Lobbying Commissioner about Liberal Party fundraising events involving ministers and lobbyists who lobby them. And here's the link. Federal Liberals violated own fundraising rules. Shocker. And that's printed September 17th, 2018, this year. So they're ignoring their own election rules. Shocker. And there's other links here with proof to what Democracy Watch is talking about. Back to the article. As well, Bill C-76 more than doubles the spending limit for third-party interest groups and individuals during election campaigns from approximately $200,000 to up to $500,000. The Liberals claim this increase is needed because the spending limit is being extended to cover election surveys and partisan activities such as door knocking, phone calls, and rallies, but only citizen groups do those kind of activities. Businesses usually only spend money on ads. As a result, the limit should be increased only for citizen groups, as the increase in the limit will more than double the amount of available businesses can do. The amount of advertising businesses can do during an election campaign period. So the rules proposed sound like the Liberals are doing something, but what they're doing is favoring rich people and big business. And And the last little bit of this story is Ipolitics tweeted this out. Canada's top 2 elections officials say a bill to modernize election laws will make it difficult to stop computer hackers from sowing chaos that confuses voters. And we look at the article. So Canada's top 2 election officials say a bill to modernize election laws will make it difficult to stop computer hackers from sowing chaos that confuses voters, deterring them from casting ballots and undermining confidence in the electoral system. Bill C-76, omnibus legislation to reform election laws, creates a new offense of computer interference in response to attempts by hackers in other countries to undermine the electoral process. While he supports the additional offense, Chief Electoral Officer Stéphane Perreault says the bill requires proof that the offender intended to affect the result of the election. He says that the qualifier will, quote, greatly restrict the application of the new offense, letting off the hook hackers who simply sow confusion. Yves Coates, sorry if I say that name wrong, the Commissioner of Elections, echoed Perreault's concern. The 2 watchdogs registered their concern during a testimony in the bill before the Senate, which is beginning its examination of the legislation. Recent history suggests that interference may be designed with the intent to sow distrust and confusion, potentially undermining voters' confidence in the process or willingness to vote, not necessarily to affect the result of the election, Perreault told the Upper House Tuesday. He suggested that the offense should be simplified to allow any attempts to interfere with the computer system used in relation to an election without any qualifiers. Coates said he agreed with Perreault's concern and added another of his own, a provision that makes an offense to make false statements about a candidate for the purpose of influencing the outcome of an election. That would cover only a specific type of false statements, for instance, about the citizenship or birthplace of a candidate. I found that interesting. And why did I find that interesting? Well, we have an Iranian MP who said that she was born in Afghanistan until she, found out she was born in Iran, but she's an MP, a sitting MP. So if we were to have these rules, questioning her citizenship would be not allowed under Bill C-76, because that's I'm not sure why that is, but that's what is said in there. As I said, I could talk about Bill C-76 for an hour and still not scratch the surface. It's insanity. So it would be against the rules to talk about her citizenship or anybody's citizenship or birthplace. So that's crazy, but it would exclude a whole range of other false statements about a candidate's character or beliefs, such as accusing someone of being a racist or homophobic, allegations that can be among the most serious and most injurious and are currently prohibited under the Canada Election Act. So they're opening it up to be able to call people racist and homophobic, but you can't talk about people's birthplace. That's off the table. So I was going to go through what the Liberals kind of backbenchers. I have a liberal backbencher's opinion on Bill C-76, and I was going to do that too, just to give a bit more context to the whole bill and kind of what they think they're doing. But I think this kind of puts it into a digestible package. On one hand, they're opening up votes to expats who have been gone from Canada for more than 5 years and who never intend to return. They are allowing vouching for people to vote, to say, yeah, I'm a Canadian citizen, and yeah, I definitely live in this district for sure, and this guy here knows me. While at the same time watching what's happening in Florida and Arizona, and there's all sorts of just out and out electoral fraud done by the Democrats. And this is Canadian news. I don't want to pull American news into there, but I talk a lot about Europe and their problems informing our conversations. This problem should inform our conversations. Why aren't we talking about massive electoral fraud and the fact that this bill doesn't do anything to combat it? It enables it, really, in a whole lot of ways. So we've got Conservative Party members, shadow ministers, holding press conferences that I didn't see covered too much in the mainstream news. But to be fair, I don't look on CBC all that often because it's propaganda, it's garbage, fake news, trash. So I wish I wasn't paying for it with my tax dollars, right? So I may have missed it, but my point is we've got the CPC pointing out massive flaws in this bill. We've got senators pointing out massive flaws in this bill, and we've got a tone-deaf Liberal government holding a majority and ramming it through. Why? I mean, I think the why is obvious, because they want to retain power, and adding a whole bunch of swing votes to whatever riding needs them is pretty easy with this bill, right? So, concerning, very, very concerning. I'm not sure how to combat something like this. Call your MP, tell them that this isn't something that you're interested in. Tell them that it is as dangerous as the Global Compact on migration is. Ask Andrew Scheer to take a position on the Global Compact on migration other than it's not legally binding, because that's not a position. That would be really nice. Maybe ask Andrew Scheer to take a position on the UN as well. So Bill C-76 is dangerous. The Liberals in power will be enshrined if the Global Compact on migration is signed and this bill gets rammed through. I think Justin Trudeau wins an easy majority, unfortunately. So thank you for watching. Check out the People's Party of Canada. And maybe. Thanks for watching, everyone.